We have all the big things that we're going to ask nothing more controversial to discuss. Yeah. I know.
Hello. We're going to give people a few minutes to sort of start filtering before we get going properly. We don't have a particularly packed agenda, so let's let the room settle for a bit and then we'll make a start.
You did Bushy's while I was into it. Thanks.
So let's meet Echo.
Meet you. I'm thinking you would meet Echo.
Well, you should. Well, you're gonna have to control this one. Control this one.
Yeah.
But if somebody on Meet Echo says they want to speak, we should see them there, and people here can see them as well.
Right. And I should be able to mute her.
And you should be able to basically get them. Yeah, the mute by default, so you have to announce that they're available.
Is there a human?
I don't think so. I think they're watching remotely.
Maybe somebody is in the queue and they speak. Because there's no participant speaking. So it starts to speak.
Okay, we're just going to give it 2 more minutes. People are still filtering in. And in any case, the first 10 minutes slot, administrative review is pretty much settled anyway. Or administrative review, we have a job description.
That's true.
It's supposed to have to agenda actually.
Okay. Cool. See you later.
I'll announce it. Okay, let's make a start. Okay, let's make a start. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to welcome the survivors of the HOMENET protocol routing wars to Buenos Aires. Right, we're down quite a few of our regular participants this time. I think this must be the quietest HOMENET session ever. So let's hope that there'll be more of us in Buenos Aires. So let's get a few administrative bits out of the way. Thank you to Tim and Tim for volunteering to take the notes and do the Jabber reload respectively. Tim Wojcinski is doing the notes and he is using Etherpad, and he would welcome other people contributing live edits while he's doing that as well, especially if he happens to get your name wrong. So feel free to go in and fix the names if you've spoken and he didn't get you right. The blue sheets are already out, so if they can now please start circulating, that'd be great. And, oh, sorry, I'm really forgetting myself here. We should talk about the note well. If you're not familiar with the note well, please read it. If you're unable to comply with it, please leave. So a small agenda bash. Mark and I will do an update on what's happening with the various working group documents very shortly. We have Julius due to talk about the Babel profile for HOMENET. Ted Lemon's going to then speak to his HOMENET naming architecture draft, which came out early last week, fortunately slightly after the deadline, but hopefully you've had sufficient time to read it. We had hoped that Ted would also spend some time talking about security, but unfortunately time got the better of us, and or rather time got the better of Ted, and he wasn't able to actually prepare anything in time for that. Does anybody have any objections, or should we okay to proceed with that agenda as it stands? No? And hearing no objections. Okay, sorry, I will try to speak more directly into the mic for you. If there are no objections to that agenda, we shall carry on with the next stage, which is an update on working group documents. I shall let Mark take over from here.
Congratulations, we have two RFC to Bs, RFC 7787 and 7788. These are the two documents, DNCP and HNCP, being advanced together as a package. We've been CC'd on the various emails with the RFC editor and the authors, et cetera. We're seeing, progression happening. I imagine this will come to close very, very soon. You also see an update to the routing consensus call document. That was back when we were working with our area director, Terry, on exactly what we were going to state from the working group and from the ADs in terms of what to do about a mandatory to experiment with routing protocol. We emailed the list with some carefully worded text along those lines. We discussed it at the last meeting. Terry had indicated that he would like to see that published as an RFC in some form when we were talking about it at the time. But then later he said, no, actually, it's fine. The email stands as a good enough record. You have the internet draft out there. Let's just leave it at that. And we were fine, but we wanted to update the internet draft to say that, okay? To say that, oh, by the way, this isn't just sitting here expired because nobody cares. It's because we explicitly decided to just not advance it anymore because the email to the list and the discussion at the meeting last time was sufficient in his mind. So that's why that's there. And if that's fine with everybody here, then and on the list, then that'll be the last version that you see, the -01. We have some new drafts, one of which Ted will be talking about later today, and Julius will be talking about. Basically, the two new drafts are what you're going to hear about on the agenda today. Drafts hold pending other documents. We've got some stuff that's stuck because it references other working groups, in particular hybrid proxy stuff, and things related to the naming architecture that clearly Ray wants to say something about.
Yeah, the two drafts from Daniel Migo and co. on the front-end naming delegation and naming architecture, one of those has in fact just recently expired, but the position we're taking on that is that we don't see any point in advancing those whilst the overall picture of the HomeNet naming and service discovery architecture is being rationalized, and there's no point writing something up in those documents and then we actually decide as a working group that it doesn't fit and is not consistent with the overall architecture. So that's our position on those. So,
Any questions, comments on the working group update? Did we miss anything? Okay.
Okay, so without further ado and slightly ahead of schedule, let's have Julius please up to talk about the Babel profile for HomeNet. And well, I think the speakers know the drill, but please do stay within the pink square so that the remote participants can see you best. Thank you.
So hello, I'm Julius Krabacek. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So there are two issues that I'm trying to solve with this draft. One is that Babel is a flexible protocol and that different implementations interoperate, but to the extent possible. We don't do the impossible. I'm going to explain that in a second. And the other thing is that there are some interactions between HNCP and Babel, and those interactions have to be gotten just right. So I'm going to tell you about what is already written down in a draft, which is the Babel profile from HomeNet, and what I think should be added to this draft, which is the descriptions of the interactions between HNCP and Babel. Next slide, please. Okay, so Babel is a flexible protocol, and implementations can implement very different things. So they will interoperate, but one needs to understand exactly what that means. So to give you an example, it is quite legal for a Babel implementation to only implement IPv6 and not IPv4. So if you have one implementation, A, that supports IPv6 and IPv4, and a second implementation that only does IPv6, they will interoperate in the sense that they will exchange IPv6 routes, but obviously they will not exchange IPv4 routes. Next slide. And the Babel RFC, the current experimental RFC, does not fix the values of metrics. So you could very well come up with an implementation X that gives a metric of 96 to wired links, which is the case of all implementations I think that exist now, and the second implementation that assigns a metric of 1. So those two implementations will interoperate, but of course you will get suboptimal routing as the links handled by implementation Y will be preferred to those handled by implementation X. Next slide. So what I have written down is a short document that describes the subset of the protocol that a HomeNet implementation must implement, as well as suggested values that a HomeNet implement must assign to the parameters. It has 7 requirements, so I've used the numbered requirement style with a rationale after each. 5 which I expect to be non-controversial, and people are already laughing in the audience when I say non-controversial. 1 that I think has been somewhat contentious, and 1 that I don't understand. So I've written it, but I need clarification because I'll come back to that. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through the 5 less interesting requirements. Please don't take my word for that, check them in the draft. But the one that proves to be controversial is requirement 3, which says that IPv4 support is a should. And one person expressed the notion that it should be a must. My take on that is that I'm fine with should, I'm fine with must, because people will implement IPv4 for as long as the market needs it. But I'm fine with changing that to must if people think that's a good idea. Next slide, please. So I've put in requirement 5, which I don't understand. It says that a HomeNet implementation of Babel must implement.
We have plenty of time, so maybe we should take these one at a time. Can you?
So yeah, we're whizzing through here. So There's a comment on Jabber from Marcus. He says must is not really in HNCP, nor in the charter or the architecture draft, so he thinks should is fine. And
For IPv4, right?
yeah,
Okay.
and I think with my Jabber hat off, I would agree.
Should we make a call for that?
So requirement 5.
So what feedback did you just get? Where are we? I'm hearing from Lee and I'm hearing from Marcus that should is fine for that, but your slide said you would move it to must. Wait, hang on. Should, oh, that's because it says should and must on the same sentence. Should this be a must? I think consistent with this charter in the working group, it should not be a must, it should be a should. Does everybody agree?
Lee Howard, it may be a may.
Yeah, okay. It must be a should. Yes, actually. It may be a what?
It may be a may. No, I would actually be fine with may. I'll live with should.
Okay, but it must be a should.
I must is that
At least to be a should.
can't be must. We
Okay.
cannot require IPv to be, to step back from the technical jargon, we can't require IPv4 per our charter and per what's really going to happen with implementations, I think. So yes, I'm happy with this as written.
As written. Okay. So it's a should. Great. Moving right along.
Okay, so as always, there is the issue of security. So what I've put in requirement 5 is that a HomeNet implementation of Babel must implement HMAC-based authentication as defined in RFC 7298, must implement the two mandatory to implement algorithms, and must enable and require authentication when instructed to do so by HNCP. So I have no idea whether this does reflect the opinion of the working group, and I have no idea how that is supposed to work, since I don't know how HNCP is supposed to share keys with Babel. So I think this is a huge opportunity. HNCP can serve as a, manage security in the whole HomeNet, but I don't know how to do that.
I might speak to that a little bit after my presentation on names, as Ted Lemon. But I think that the musts are necessary because otherwise you'll have implementations that don't have that feature. So whether or not we're able to turn it on, we need, or whether or not we turn it on all the time, we need to be able to turn it on, and that's what that must says.
So Marcus Stenberg again on Jabber. Requirement 5, HNCP generates keying material which can be used to derive per other protocol key material. Pre-shared key implies instruct is straightforward, but I'm not sure about must.
But which must?
Michael Abramson. So I think this makes perfect sense because I expect HNCP to turn Babel on and off on certain interfaces. Like when HNCP decides that this is an external facing interface, I would expect it to tell Babel do not talk on this interface. So I think we already have that the HNCP must be able to provision or instruct Babel to do stuff. And this seems like a perfectly fine thing for HNCP to instruct Babel to do.
I think I might be Marcus quite a bit here. Marcus says must implement perhaps, although I think all musts here really imply just that A, it must be implemented, and B, enabled if and only if HNCP tells it to. So he thinks the text is fine from what he says on Jabber.
Any objections with the text as is? And of course, instruct would be some sort of internal, internal process communication, or however it works on your product between the HNCP layer and the routing protocol layer. Are we fine with that?
Michael Abramson again. I would be fine with provisioned or some other wording as well, but that's basically the same thing as saying, instructed. So I don't know.
Okay.
Lee Howard, just making a note that I do think we need to figure out how that's done, right? I don't think we're there yet, but I think that's the right thing to assign ourselves to figure out, yes.
Michael Abramson, wouldn't that be implementation specific? How this is, the interaction between HNCP, how exactly this is done?
It might be, I think.
But I don't, that seems like an implementation detail. But I don't know.
Well, I would think that we would need something, some part, and I don't think it's specified in HNCP now, but somebody who knows more than I do can correct me, that we would need a common way for HNCP to signal that it should be done. And then the Babel implementation can decide how it's going to implement, how it's going to interpret that instruction.
May I answer this perhaps before? So the two implementations of HNCP do things differently. So Marcus's and Stephen's implementation, when there is a change, restarts Babel, which caused me to do quite a lot of work on rebooting in a graceful manner. SHNCP right now doesn't speak to Babel at all, except through the kernel. And we have recently implemented a communication on the Babel side, not on the HNCP side yet, over a Unix domain socket. So I wouldn't like to mandate how this is done, because we have different implementations and we want to keep the liberty of implementing them in different manners.
Yeah, I think this is a system integration issue that we should not standardize.
Okay. I think I was talking about it needs to be standardized in HNCP. You know, how does HNCP communicate to whatever Babel implementation?
I think what it communicates should be standardized, but not how it's done. Or
Yeah.
So Marcus seems to agree with that, what he's saying on Jabber, but I'll relay it. So he doesn't object to the text as is, he's fine with that. HNCP defines the Shirky generation, and that would either be stuck to a configuration file or told by IPC. For example, Bird Daemon implementation might support that one day, but he says that's just an implementation detail. And then in response to the other comment, he says HNCP specifies it already, just no implementation details on how the process is done, as you were just saying then. And he then said, oh, brackets, skip those comments now, by the way. So he agrees with Michael.
Okay, well, we will take that to the list. As and when that's, well, I'll let Jiz continue and talk about next steps.
Well, Lee just agreed in Jabber with Marcus. So maybe we concluded that it's IPC and outside of scope. Okay.
You haven't done this one.
Oh, so, okay. So while I was writing that, I started, grabbing through the HNCP specification, and I realized that there is something that is nowhere written down, which seemed to us reasonably obvious, which is that HNCP uses Babel to announce routes, and you need to get the precise rules right. So if you have received a DHCP v6 prefix delegation, you announce a source-specific default route. On the other hand, if you receive a DHCP v4 lease, then you announce a non-specific default route. And so there is an asymmetry here between IPv6 and IPv4, and there are very good technical reasons for this asymmetry. However, if you get it wrong, you are going to get suboptimal routing, and you might even have routing black holes. So I think this needs to be written down. There is a third requirement, but the third requirement is not as sensitive. It's pretty obvious. So I think this needs to be written down somewhere, and I think that this document would be a fine place to put it.
So Michael Abramson again. So I think this is fine that this is written down, but in the last thing here, I thought Babel picked up prefixes from the kernel. So HNCP configured the interface address, and then Babel picked it up from the interface.
So that's an implementation detail.
Yes.
How HNCP causes Babel to announce the prefix is the internal business. And again, HNetD and SHNCP do it differently.
Okay, so in the third bullet point here, it said it announces. So HNCP announces a route, or do I misunderstand?
Okay, so I have used it, so here I've been loose. This is stuff that is not written down yet.
Yeah.
Before it can belong in a draft, I need to check very carefully both implementations to check whether they comply, and if they don't, why. So here, the point of view I'm taking is that HNCP is using Babel to announce the routes. So if you want to see it as Babel, as HNCP causes Babel to announce the routes, that's fine too.
Yes. So this is, for me, the first word on the second line of the third bullet point is confusing. I don't know what it announces, what it in this case is, because HNCP doesn't announce routes, as far as I know.
Marcus Stenberg via Java. HNCP node is essentially the whole router, he thinks. For example, HNetD has nothing to do with DHCP-v6 or DHCP sourced routes, and instead Babel propagates them directly from kernel fib, brackets Linux has no real rib except in particular routing daemons.
David Lampeter. So I agree, but I think this is slightly overspecified, especially the first two clauses, because there may be some other way that the node gets internet connectivity and it's not DHCP, so it just needs to be a little bit less specific, I think.
Okay. So the thing that is important here is that in the V6 case, David, in the V6 case, it is a source-specific default route. Well, in the V4 case, it's a non-specific route. That is the part that has to be gotten right.
Right, but it might not be DHCP for v6, for example.
Sure.
So.
Sorry, David, can I clarify? So you're saying it may be an RA, for example, instead?
Yes, for example.
Or manual configuration. I fully agree.
What's the real problem with?
You might be tempted to announce a source-specific DHCP v4 IPv4 route, in which case, if you have...
Sorry, I mean, you're just repeating yourself. So why aren't they separate to the point that we don't care? Or are you saying that there's a dual stack application somewhere that might put some traffic over v4, some traffic over v6?
No.
And if it's disparate routes, they would care?
No, what I'm saying is that if some nodes distribute a source-specific and others a non-specific default route, you will have routing failures. Speak about DHCP, about IPv4 only. So in IPv4, if you have some nodes that announce a specific route, others a non-specific route, you're going to have issues. So everyone has to agree that IPv4 is non-specific, or
Yes.
or the opposite.
I already had that in my mind, but okay,
That's
I
the
got
point.
it now.
Michael Abrahamson again. So I have to agree with David here that it should be DHCP-v6 or other mechanism, but I think you already...
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
So when it says receives a DHCP-v6 prefix, it should be somehow gets a prefix configured by some mechanism. So, but I think you already agreed with David on that part, right?
And to be clear, this seems like a general dual stack source-specific routing issue.
Mhm.
We may come up with a solution such as assume non-specific default route in a HOMENET, but it's a general issue. I wonder if it needs to be stated in some source dest routing document in its general form.
Perhaps.
Okay. We'll make a note of that in the minutes, whoever's taking them, please. Thank you, Tim.
Next, please. Okay, so what I'm suggesting here is that we write a single two-part document that describes the Babel profile for HOMENET, perhaps based on the current draft, and a second part that describes the interactions between HNCP and Babel, something that is not written yet. The only written down thing is slide 8 of this presentation. And I would like to suggest that this should be a working group document. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Julius. We have some more commentary, so let's go ahead with that.
Yeah, Michael Abrahamson again. So you said only that it should specify the metric along the lines of what was written there. Don't we want to specify that a bit more, or do you want to specify that in Babel in the potential new working group?
So one of the requirements that I haven't put in this presentation, one of the 5 requirements, speaks about metrics.
Mhm.
Okay, and what it says is there is a must and a should. The must says that the metrics must be no less than 96 for wired, no less than 256 for wireless links. The should says you should be using an algorithm on wireless links that determines link quality. Okay, so if you want to tighten this formulation, that's a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up here is when we're doing a Babel profile, it sounds like that would be beneficial if Babel implementations behaved, similar in this aspect when it comes to setting the metric, and not just it should be in the same order of magnitude, but it should, or it should be closer. It should be more specified somehow. And this could be a later work. I don't know, but I think that should be more specific.
Okay, so first we're speaking about home networks here, which I expect to have a reasonable amount of diversity. You're not expecting to have 10 different paths between 2 routers. So if the values of the metrics are not exactly, so if one router has 1 and 196, you'll run into trouble. But if one uses 96 and another 104, you're still going to get pretty optimal routing. At the same time, I don't want to prevent people from experimenting with better link quality estimators. So I wouldn't like this, as we discussed it yesterday, there is a lot of work to be done on link quality estimators, and I would definitely not want us right now to say, you must use this link quality estimator, don't experiment with anything new.
No, I fully agree with that.
Okay.
Just, I don't know, we should put in some note on this, that this is being done somewhere else, or future work or something like that. Okay, so never mind.
David Lamparter. So I would just like to voice agreement, as in I personally think that it's very important to have for HomeNet, for the application space of HomeNet, a document describing what the metrics are and what algorithm you're using. And I think this is absolutely in scope for HomeNet and not for the Babel working group, because this is application specific to the HomeNet domain. And those metrics that we are writing down here are for HomeNet, and some admin using Babel in the wireless network or whatever, they may have completely different things that they need. So I think we should do this here.
Okay, thank you. So from the chair, what we'll probably do is issue a working group call for adoption to the mailing list, just to get the formalities out of the way. I can't see personally any reason why this won't be adopted. Now, with respect to the interactions between HNCP and Babel, this is probably a question for Julius, who's just gone and sat down. Do you feel, Julius, that you could do with additional contributors to such a document? Sorry, do you feel that you could benefit from having additional contributors to the document to address that? Okay, and presumably the HNCP experts would probably be a useful pool for that.
Certainly.
Yeah, so okay, unfortunately most of the HNCP folks aren't here. Not sure, in fact, if any of them are here. But yeah, we would encourage them to work with Julius, and let's do as Julius has proposed and get this all addressed in that document.
That said, if we have any aspiring HNCP experts, don't be shy. We could use more than just the few that aren't here today.
Okay, if there's nothing further on the Babel side, I'll have to call Ted up to talk about the naming architecture draft.
Hi, this is Ted Lemon.
Can't hear.
Huh?
We may need to raise the mic a bit.
Can't hear it? I can stand closer to it. How's that? Okay. Next slide. I assume everybody knows what I'm going to be talking about. How many people have read the document, by the way? Oh, thank you for doing that. Okay, so obviously one of the goals of this is to clarify for people who've read the document, which is not actually all that many folks sitting here, stuff that they might have questions about. Then I'd also like to just give everybody else in the room sort of a taste of what the document talks about so that they'll get excited and go read it. And then the tomato throwing section, I'd like people to talk about things that they think the document tries to do that maybe are not a good idea, and also to point out anything that they might think is missing from the document. Next slide. So I forgot to document the multiple namespace case. That's the case where you might want to have more than one subdomain in your HOMENET. The HOMENET document currently just talks about a single forward domain, but that was just an oversight, and I'll add that in a new version. I forgot to add the remote device registration case. This is the case where you have a device that you're using in the HOMENET. You'd like to be reachable in the HOMENET even when you're not actually there. For example, you might have a phone that has something on it that you want some device in your home to be able to get to, reach out to, and it would be nice if there were a way to register that. So that will be added in a future version of the document. One of the things in the HOMENET architecture is a requirement for being able to rename devices, give a device that's got a name in the HOMENET namespace a different name. And implicitly that's without actually telling the device that it's got a different name and making the device register that different name. That's problematic. I don't think it's possible with MDNS. There's an idea for how to make DNS updates work in the document, and I think it could be done with that. So it's possible that we could specify that, and that's probably how I would address that. And then otherwise, I went through the HOMENET architecture requirements again this morning just to check, and I'm pretty sure that I hit everything. So I think it's complete. If you don't think it's complete, please tell me. I think Tim is going to tell me that it's not complete.
Tim Chang, is this okay? I was told I was overdriving the mic before. Can you hear me like this?
I can hear you.
So I've got a hearing problem, so I can't. Yeah, so as you're well aware, Ted, there was the Christians talk came up in DNSSD, so maybe we want to think in this about obfuscated names from the privacy point of view as well.
Yeah, so
fit that in somehow.
Right, that is an interesting point. Yeah, the problem with doing, I mean, I think it's probably what I should do is just say that this is something that needs to be done in its future work, because I honestly don't know how to do it. And I think that if we tried to hold off on completing this document until I know how to do it, but by all means, if you have a suggestion, send text.
So I think, thanks. Yeah, I think that will get teased out in discussion of Christian's draft, which we should probably send on to the HOMENET list maybe.
Bearing in mind, Christian, when he stood up in front of the group, said, "I don't know how to do this either." So,
but he's waving the flag.
Sure.
And the other thing, of course, is the discussion of the hybrid proxy approach against the DNS update approach.
Right.
I think in DNSSD we agreed to take that to a separate, maybe short document to discuss.
It's not going to be a short document, but yeah.
Okay.
No,
a separate document.
We just simply can't do it the exact same way that MDNS SD hybrid does it, and have it work in the HOMENET, which is fine. What I think we can do, and I talk about it in a later slide, by the way, so we could get to that then. What we can do is come up with a way to do it that's compatible with what MDNS SD hybrid does, and that's what I'd like to do. But it's not going to be the same exact thing. Dave, did you want to say something?
Not on that point.
It's just that Andrew Sullivan on Jabber has said perhaps we should, for the number of people that haven't read the document, it would be a good idea to get the overview out of the way before we start talking about things that are missing.
Right, yeah, actually, I didn't intend, the point of this slide was to tell you what you didn't have to tell me about, not to get you to tell me what was missing. So I should have articulated that better. That's a very good point.
I think Andrew was saying put that slide at the end. But,
I'm sorry?
I think Andrew was saying put that slide at the end of the presentation. But
sure.
This is Dave Taylor. Can I actually ask a question on the slide then?
You may.
Okay. I understand everything on the slide, but you lost me on the third bullet. So I didn't follow what the third bullet was or what the relationship was to the naming architecture.
Okay, so the idea is that, imagine that you're
I've read parts of the draft, but
Sure.
not all of them, and I couldn't find
Sure.
the term renaming
Let's-
any place in it. So.
Let's think of a HomeNet as like analogous to what you or I might have done at our respective corporations in 1990 when we were operating a zone file, right? It's got a bunch of names in it. Those names correspond to hosts, and it's just very natural to go in and want to, change a name, like, or put in. So the name, like, if you've got a workstation that belongs to person A and you want to give it to person B, you might change its name. So
Right,
it's
but you're
it's
doing that
simply-
by changing the name of the workstation, not by changing a name in a database. So that's why I'm confused.
I
What's the
agree
relationship to
that
this
that is
topic?
the correct way to solve the problem. The question is whether it's possible. Because remember, we're getting the names of, so in the example that I talked
Feel free
about.
to call time and say you don't want to spend time in here, because all I'm arguing is I don't understand why that's actually part of the discussion here. So if you're saying, let's not discuss it now, that's actually a fine answer, so.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that this isn't actually, it would be nice to be able to do this, but this is not a core piece of functionality. So yeah, let's go on to the next slide. Sorry. Okay, good enough. Aspects of the architecture. So first of all, just on a very high level, there are the document as currently written describes two databases of names. One of those names is the set of names that you might think of as the forward zone. So, host names, but also services. So service discovery might be done in that zone. And then there's a reverse zone. And this is, sort of inatter.arpa, ip6.arpa used. And there's been some discussion about whether the reverse zone is actually useful. And my main reason for wanting it is just because it's a convenient place to put things about an IP address that might be local, like a key that you could use or something like that. So I think it is worth having, and that's why it's in there, but that's a point that can be discussed. Currently, it does not support the model for naming a human-readable subdomain as is described in the DNSSD hybrid document. And Stuart and I had a conversation about whether or not there's a better way to do that, and Stuart said you go think about it, and so that could turn out in a variety of ways. But anyway, so the idea is basically two databases, two places where data about names are stored in the HomeNet. And if you were to do a multi-subdomain HomeNet architecture, both of these, well, actually, no, I guess just the forward would be duplicated, or there would be two of them. Then there's a question of public versus local. Public is stuff that would be visible from the internet. If you have a global domain name, if the HomeNet has a global domain name, you would be able to go type nslookup or dig and then some name, and in principle, it would look it up. Of course, we don't want to publish necessarily every name that appears in the HomeNet out on the global internet. So the public domain, the public namespace is kind of a bowdlerized version of the private domain space with not as much stuff in it. The private domain space is expected to contain every name that's published in the HomeNet. So that way you can discover all the services in the HomeNet. You can talk, between subnets. You can talk to devices in the HomeNet and so forth. There's a question that I had as to whether we also need a guest namespace. The reason you might want to do that is if you have a friend come over, you want to play some, P2P game with your friend, you want to be able to rendezvous, but you don't really want to give your friend the keys to the kingdom. You don't want them on your main network. You want them on your guest network. So maybe we need to solve that problem. The current draft doesn't. And then the document is written with the assumption that we want to be able to support the use case where the HomeNet actually has a publicly reachable domain name in the DNS. But also it has to work if it doesn't, and so it talks about a .homenet special use TLD could be .home. I chose .homenet because I was pretty sure that .home had conflicts and wasn't a good idea, and Tim Wachinski is nodding yes, so I'll take that as having been a good idea. And also I actually think it sounds better. So anyway, so that's the basic high-level view of what names look like in the HomeNet. And then next slide. So the database So I talked about two different views of the database, and actually there's notionally probably, I was really thinking that the private, the local version of the database would be the ideal view of the database with all of the data in it, but actually I don't think that's correct, and you'll see why in a minute. So I think there's sort of an ideal version that has everything in it. That's what gets updated. It's what we collect from MDNS or from DNS updates from services, and that's maintained as a database which is shared either using an authoritative primary name server or using some kind of other mechanism. But I assume in the document that it's just an auth-NS, an authoritative name server, and then. The public and private, the public and local, I said private on the slide, but that's actually, it's not really private because somebody could get onto the network that isn't you and they can see it, so that's not private. But the public and local views of the database are probably also, they could be DNS zones that are derived from this DNS zone programmatically. And then the public and private names, private zones have the same external name. So if they have a global name, that name is the same, and which zone you see depends on whether you're at home or whether you're away from home. If you're away from home, you only see public names. If you're at home, you see all of the names. And there's also a .homenet namespace, and the names will always appear in the .homenet namespace. And the reverse zones will have the same kind of treatment, and they appear on the HomeNet whether there's a delegation for them or not. And I'll get into that in a minute, but they appear on the HomeNet even if the ISP didn't delegate you that prefix, the reverse tree for that prefix. Next slide. So when I was writing this, I'd read the MDNS hybrid draft, and it didn't seem to quite do what I wanted, and instead of trying to conform this to it, I decided that I'd rather change it, which may or may not have been the right decision, and that's something the working group should think about. But in my opinion, it's not quite right, and there are a couple of reasons that are described in the document. I'm not going to go into it here unless people want to, but my feeling is we needed to find something new. It would work a bit like MDNS hybrid, but not exactly. And ultimately, what we really want is for servers on the HomeNet to use DNS updates with a secure key mechanism that uses, sort of first come, first serve. If you claim the name and put your key on it, then someone else can't come later and say, no, wait, that's my name, because they don't have the key. So that's the long-term goal is that, but obviously that is a long-term goal. No devices currently do that. I don't think any device manufacturer has even thought of doing that. And whether they would do that if we wrote a spec that told them how, I don't know. It's quite possible they would not, but maybe they would. So I'd like to do that just because I think it would be good to have that option. Tim?
Tim Chang. So, yeah, as Stuart says in the hybrid proxy draft, the hybrid proxy solution is a pragmatic thing for now.
Right. Yeah.
In the absence of DNS update being widely available.
Yeah, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I've got ringing in my ears, sort of, even though I can't hear, is 2 or 3 IETFs ago, someone gave the chairs of DNSSD a good slapping for assuming sort of English language domain name for this. So you might want to, in the document, use LQDN or whatever the language we used in the architecture document is, rather than assuming it's home or HomeNet or whatever, perhaps.
Are you talking about the static, the sort of special use domain, like .homenet? Now we have to register a special use domain for every language. That could get pretty ugly, but yeah, okay, point taken. Next slide. I think, can you remind me of that, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit, because I honestly have no idea how to address that, and I think maybe you do, at least more so than I. I don't think we need to do it at the mic. I think everybody will be horribly bored by it.
So I don't have an answer, but I think in a way it was a valid point, but
Yeah, I think
Point
it's a
you
valid
make
point
as
too.
well.
I just don't know how to do it. Okay, so global domain names. I mentioned that ideally, or perhaps not ideally, but at least optionally, HomeNet should have a name. The names that are known on the HomeNet should be knowable from the intranet. And in order for that to happen, the HomeNet has to have a global name, a name that appears in the domain name system. And in order for that to happen, there has to be some process for making it happen. Probably most of the people in the room are familiar with the process of going to your local domain name registrar and registering a name, and then going to your local, well, I'll talk about that in a minute, but I don't think that's going to really work for a HomeNet, because, let's face it, we're all much better at dealing with registrars than the average person, and I don't want everybody who has a HomeNet and wants to have a public name to have to learn how to talk to a registrar. So I think that this requires a new service, which I have called GNRP. A global name registration provider. And the idea here is essentially that the HomeNet needs to be able to have some kind of probably RESTful API or something. I got a little bit slapped for saying RESTful API because that assumes a solution, which isn't necessarily the right thing, but some kind of API that allows the user to pick a name, probably not, like I have a domain fugue.com that I've had since like 1997 or something like that, or no, well, yeah, probably 1997. Anyway, so I don't expect them to get that. I expect them to get something more like, apple.bear.fugue.com, just so that you've got a unique name. And that could be very cheaply done, and it can all be done with HTTP requests for the most part. One of the things that I'd like this service to provide is also a PKI cert for the name, because if you don't have PKI, then you're going to get all kinds of warnings from your browser if you try to do secure connections to the web API for the HomeNet, and assuming that there is a web API for the HomeNet. And I think it's extremely bad design to set things up so that people see those security warnings. I'd actually rather not encrypt than have them see that warning, because that warning trains them to click through the warning. And it's probably a battle that can't be won, but I don't think that we should be on the wrong side of it. The GNRP can be provided by the ISP. Doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be required that it be provided by the ISP. The ISP does have to do the reverse zone delegation because they own the address space. The mechanism has to be specified. I'm not sure exactly where that's going to happen or if it's going to happen. I think it should happen, and we need to find a place for it to happen. And then I think also the delegation of the reverse requires a spec. And Daniel Migaud has worked a bit on this, and I've worked with Daniel a bit. I haven't actually looked too closely at Daniel's drafts for a while, and so I need to rethink, and this was something that the chairs were talking about earlier, I need to rethink whether, or exactly how those fit into what's written in this document, and whether I need to change this document or suggest changes to Daniel. Next slide. So the HomeNet naming architecture assumes that naming is secure on the HomeNet. And that's not that hard of a problem if you have a global name. It's a pretty hard problem, though, if you don't have a global name, because currently a validating resolver has no way to establish trust for a local zone that has the same name as that equivalent zone in everybody else's house. If everybody has .homenet, how do you establish trust? I express an idea for using a sort of a trust on first use model in the document, where the HomeNet publishes a universally unique identifier, which is a randomly generated number that's big enough that it's very unlikely that there would be a collision. And then the .homenet name, the .homenet domain for your .homenet will have a UUID that is different than the UUID for a different HomeNet, and that zone will be signed with a key that is that proves that that UUID is claimed by that zone. It doesn't, you could have a clash. Two different HomeNets could have the same UUID just by random incredibly bad luck. But if that happened, you would get a validation failure, and so the right thing would essentially occur. Because chances are you got the UUID for your HomeNet before you got the UUID for their HomeNet. And so essentially that zone is signed with a key, and that the UUID is enclosed in the zone so that whenever you go to different HomeNets, you can tell which HomeNet you're on and whether you actually trust it or not. And then you can do secure name resolution in those HomeNets that you've decided to trust using the trust on first use model. Dave seems excited about saying something about this.
Dave Taylor, I'm actually confused, so I was going to ask if you could elaborate. Let's say that there's two HomeNets. They have different UUIDs.
Yes.
Both of those HomeNets have a machine in it with a name, say, Banana. Okay.
Sorry?
Both your house and my house have a machine in it, a host in it with the name Banana.
Right.
I have my laptop. I'm currently sitting in your house,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to resolve banana.homenet. What are you saying you want to happen here, and how does security work?
That is an excellent question to which I did not express an answer in the document and should have.
I don't see any answer, and so.
I think the answer is difficult. So it sort of depends on whether you're
Well, one answer would be to say, if you have ambiguous names like banana.homenet, sorry, you don't get security, don't do that. Use the global name.
actually that doesn't work. The reason it
Neither
does
does anything else, so I just think
well, right, no. I mean, the problem is that when you're in someone else's HomeNet, okay, you know that you're in a different HomeNet, but you don't have a copy of your HomeNet's zone. So how do you know that that name exists in your HomeNet's zone? You don't.
I thought that you had an architecture for doing remote resolution.
You
If I
do,
can
but does
somehow
that mean that
find-
every time you look up a name, so actually in the case that you're doing remote resolution, you have a global name, so you don't have an ambiguity
That's
anymore.
what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
I think that could possibly work and have
Yeah.
be secured, but of course it has some usability. Well, how do I get the global name and so on, as you talked
Yeah.
about before? But I don't see that there's any solution for the ambiguous name. If it's just
Right.
.homenet or
Yeah,
something.
there isn't.
I don't know how it's possible to secure that and have a good user experience. Sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the way you secure the only way that I can think of to secure that is basically to have an application that needs to have a trust relationship with that particular device to cache that device's key, and then it can look at the name entry and see if it's got the same key, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't use it. But that's kind of kludgy. So, and it requires applications to do a lot of work that I'd rather applications didn't have to know how to do. So yeah, there isn't a great solution to this problem, and it's something that we might want to think about. But I'm not confident that we'll come up with an answer. So next slide. So there's two models of management for the HomeNet, and I needed to talk about this because I don't go into this in the slides, but there's a whole issue with data recovery in the case of loss. So, HomeNet routers, people don't think of them as having precious data on them. And so it would not be at all shocking for somebody to take their sole HomeNet router that has all of their keys on it and chuck it and replace it for a different HomeNet router without ever realizing that they're screwing themselves. And so there needs to be some kind of provision for how to deal with that, and that requires some kind of management API. And there's two different models for managing it. One is that the end user manages it, and the other is that the end user contracts the management out to someone like their ISP or some third-party service provider. And so there's text in the document that deals with both of those use cases. User management through the browser, as I mentioned earlier, requires some kind of PKI. If you don't have a PKI, you don't have a secure connection to the browser. You can't really tell you're talking to the right thing. You might say things to someone else's HomeNet that you don't want to say. So we have to have that. Another way to do this, which also helps with the key problem, is if you had an application on your iPhone or your Android phone or your Sailfish phone or whatever, you could have your phone cache the keys. And And that way, if you blow away your home net, you can recover it with the data that you saved on your phone. But if we want to do that, we have to have a standard API, or we're going to have a million different apps out there, all of which do something different and use, cobble together ad hoc stuff that doesn't really work, and we get lock-in and uninterrupt, and that sucks. And then for the central management case, I think I explained the use case there. I think netconfig or a RESTful API is probably the way to go. Probably netconfig, because there seems to be a certain amount of energy behind that model in the industry right now. And obviously, if we do that, we need a way to provision it. And corollary to all of this is that I'm really talking about something that belongs in the HomeNet management architecture document, which does not exist. So that's something that probably merits further exploration. Next slide.
Actually, Ted, I have a question from the chair on that one, particularly with respect to our charter and the scope of HomeNet, which is unmanaged networks. When you're talking about the central management on this slide, are you envisaging something simply where the centralized system is providing almost a rendezvous service, or are you actually talking about something where a third party is performing the management? For example, I'm taking the analogy of a Nest box, where a Nest box is rendezvous with external systems and can be managed through those, but they do not actually manage the box per se.
So the reason why that's there is, I realize that is in fact a little out of scope for HomeNet, but the reason why that's there is because I don't want to get into the situation that we have with practically every other IoT device on the planet, which is that there isn't a management way, there isn't a way to have it be managed that is not controlled by the person that sold it to you. So if we don't do this, we're going to wind up with all of these routers looking like Nest boxes. And Nest boxes are great, they're very pretty, they provide good functionality, but I don't like lock-in, and I don't think lock-in is what the IETF should be encouraging. And in order for us to discourage it, should we choose to do so, I think we do need to address this use case. So,
okay.
So anyway, next slide. One additional thing that I will just interject here before we actually take comments is that in the process of writing this, it became clear to me that we really need to have a HomeNet security architecture, and we don't. And a lot of the things that I write in here are written kind of assuming that there is a HomeNet security architecture that just magically will appear as a result of the vacuum that this document creates. So I'm actually in the process of formulating in my head what I think that architecture should say, and I'd love it if there would be people that would be interested in collaborating with me on that. But I don't have a whole lot more to say about it than that at the moment.
Yeah, and from the chairs, we would strongly encourage that. I mean, it is one of our charter areas. It has to happen.
So send me mail if you want. Or, if you want to come up with a competing document because you think I'm an idiot, which I'm sure people do, that's okay too. I don't have any attachment to that. It's just something that I think needs to be done, and if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. So Lee?
Lee Howard. Oh, sorry, that was a little too loud. Lee Howard. This is one of those points, of course, where I always say, hey, we need a document, and I always like to point out to anybody in user land, when somebody says we need a document, if you've always wanted to author an internet draft that can become an RFC, this is your chance. There's a space here waiting to put your name on it, which is not what I came up to say. Mm-hmm. There are two things. One, I didn't stand up fast enough when you were talking about the population of the global zones, and you said and the ISP should delegate the reverse to the home gateway.
Can. Not should.
Well, the document says should.
Does the document say should?
The document says should.
To the ISP?
Yes. It actually, it's not a capital should.
Yeah, right, fine, yeah, no, there are no RFC 2119 keywords in the document. So when I said should, that was my personal opinion. It's not something that I think the IETF should dictate to operators. And
that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much. I am perfectly content to use the word should in non-RFC 2119 contexts. I'm happy with that. The other one is, I haven't quite spent enough time looking at the GNRP. That seems big.
Yes.
It seems like you're doing a lot there.
Yes.
Which I think we're really going to want to socialize. I'm not even sure that's actually in charter. It may be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I said that when I presented it. It's a pretty big thing. I don't even know where to do it yet.
Yeah, it's going to be, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Andrew Sullivan. So first of all, thank you for writing this because it's valuable. I think that there is a fairly serious gap in the document, unless I overlooked it, and that is if you use the sort of globally ambiguous name, lots of stuff doesn't work.
Yes.
And it would be good to sort of state that in a single sentence up front, because it actually removes a lot of confusion. And after the third reading, I realized, oh, I see, this just doesn't work in that case.
Right.
So there's a bunch of stuff that would help.
Yes, that's a real, I wrote this before. I spent about 3 days thinking about that problem. And so there, that's a very good point.
And then I guess just on the other, on another issue, because I don't want to fully explore this rat hole, but we started to talk about it earlier, and that is this internationalization thing. There's a thing that came up in the Jabber room, and I think this is an important difference, right? The names in MDNS, the final label is hidden in the UI, and the point here with this globally ambiguous name is that it's not going to be hidden, I think.
Yes.
Or unless we think that that's something we want to impose on user interfaces, which I think would be an interesting adventure for the IETF to start.
Yeah.
So that's a really important difference, and it means that there are internationalization considerations. The IETF actually has a requirement for internationalization considerations, which is honored, as far as I can tell, entirely by ignoring it. But it's going to be problematic here, and this is a fundamentally unsolvable problem. So I'm glad that we've embraced that, and held on tight.
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, so a little anecdote from ancient days at DEC. We had this problem that we couldn't sell our devices in certain, I guess in the EU or whatever predated the EU, because I'm not sure the EU had actually, I don't know, anyway. So we changed all of the names, all of the words that were used in the boot ROM, which was the place where this was an issue. All of those words were changed so that they didn't have any vowels in them, so that they weren't really English words. And I think that might be a little bit too little for this problem, but it may be that what we want. See, the problem with .homenet is that it is mnemonic for people who speak English, and it would be nice if there were something like that for other people, as opposed to just using a name that is, like GNOME.
Yeah, well, so just so that you understand the number of thorns that you have just grasped, yesterday at the HNRC, right, the Human Rights Research Group, somebody gave a presentation about a programming language that they tried to write in Arabic, using Arabic script, including like never using left to right scripts, and it turns out not to work very well. So I think this is going to be a real problem.
Thank you, I think. Stuart.
Stuart Cheshire. Quick comment on this subject, the international text. We need to make a distinction between what goes over the wire and what users see. And in an ideal world, those don't need to be the same thing. If we define that .homenet is a special label that signifies these non-globally unique names, then the UI layer of the software can show a little picture of your house or something in italics, or however we want to represent that. In a different language, but on the wire it has to be the same string, because I don't want to visit Canada and find my iPhone doesn't work because it's not speaking French on the wire. So on the wire it has to be the same language worldwide. And it is a little bit unfortunate that we tend to use English mnemonics in those wire formats because it's convenient for debugging. But that damage is mitigated if the user never sees it. When I tap the AirPrint button on my iPhone and it says term printer, I'm not seeing any .local or IPP or any of the other things that are in the protocol.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that's missing from the HomeNet architecture document, HomeNet naming architecture document is currently written, is that in the hybrid DNS document, you talk about being able to have hierarchical names, so building one, printer one, and you might want to have something like that for your HomeNet, where you give your HomeNet a name, and then when you're somewhere else, you see a different hierarchical name. So when you see printer one, it's printer one at this other house, and you don't think it's the same printer. The one issue with the using something other than what's on the wire is that it has to be something that definitely would not clash with names that could be allocated. So your icon of a house is a good idea, but that then doesn't work for blind users and doesn't work for, although, the icon of a house could have an internationalized mnemonic, but we have to be careful that we don't wind up with the blind user thinking that it's a domain in that case. So yeah. Blah.
So relaying Marcus Stenberg from a few moments ago. So he says it actually depends. DNSSD legacy browse is typically hidden one flat list of services. I think this is repeating what Stuart has said.
Yeah.
And normal browse, one with domains, includes domain names also in service names in the user interface. Ironically enough, legacy browse seems the more supported type. I think the comment with Tim Chown, my own comment is, I think it was Jeff Houston that raised this first about 6 or 7 meetings ago, very vocally, that we should be considering this somehow. And I do remember from a recent discussion on some lists that in the GTLD allocations, I think .home, .corp and another domain were parked to be punted back to the IETF, or not to be discussed here, I'm sure, but there were those 3 new GTLDs that were not allocated on the basis the IETF might want to do something.
Yes. Well, they aren't allocated. They're just marked do not allocate.
Okay. We still have plenty of time for discussion, unusually, having got the router walls out of the way.
Step forward again, Tim Chown. So I think I popped you an email about it, but it is probably a very busy time. Did you read Marcus's hybrid proxy 0conf draft? It's not cited in this, but it's essentially parked for publication as a way of auto-configuring hybrid proxy in a home net. And
yeah, so I'm embarrassed to say that I have not.
Yeah. So it might be worth, before 01 of this.
There's a little bit of, man, I've been meaning to do this for a while, and there's the deadline. I better get going in this document. So yeah, there needs to be probably a dash. There's a -01 coming with everybody's comments and the things that I've learned since then, but there probably needs to be a -02 where I go back and read the documents I should have read before I wrote it and go back and
it's not too long a document. It's about 9 or 10 pages, I think, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, that'll take no time at all.
Hi, Aubrey Doria speaking. I just wanted to note that CHM, Corp, Home, and Mail are not marked do not allocate yet. They're still an item of contention.
Oh dear. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure Tim or Suzanne will correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand the situation is that ICANN have said that they will not delegate those, but as yet there are still at least 10 outstanding applications for .home who have yet to withdraw their interest.
Are you aware if anybody has asked for .HomeNet?
No, there's no application for .HomeNet in the first round of GTLD applications.
And Michael Abramson, I just typed this in the Java room. I thought I'd say it here. Why don't we ask for something, like XM -- has been reserved for the IDN. So why don't we ask them to create some kind of hierarchy for this kind of special username that never goes into actual DNS?
Well, so that's a topic that we probably really don't want to get into here.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you're interested in that topic, we're going to be discussing it in DNSOP on Friday.
Yeah, sorry, without my chair hat on, actually there may be some mileage in that. I mean, XN-hyphen is allocated as a prefix specifically for IDNs. XX is actually almost a namespacing there, and you can't have a normal name with the -- in it like that. So, notwithstanding it's not particularly user-friendly, that might mitigate some of those problems. But
yeah.
Without my hair chat on.
Yeah, we would need to make sure that the name is not going to be used in some UI, in some thing that was written by somebody who never read an RFC, which is a very common thing. Given that it's constrained to the home net, maybe that's safe. But the problem is when you get into the case where people do sanity checking on names and they're like, oh, XM -- that's not a valid domain name. We'll just reject that. We'll give you an error. And then your host, you can't use your thing. So we don't want to do that. Andrew?
Andrew Sullivan. So this is the very adventure that I suggested earlier we might not want to get into, right? Because the reason XN minus minus ended up being used for IDNA is because it's internationalized domain names for applications. And so every application needs to become IDNA aware. And if what you're saying is in order to use this mechanism, you also have to have HomeNet aware applications, I think we're going to be in a world of hurt.
Yes.
I think that doesn't meet the requirements that we set for ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, it would solve this problem in that you could just scope things in a new, A through Z minus minus patterned name, and then you'd be all scoped. But it has this nasty property that now we're starting to specify stuff at the wire format in order to enable certain UI behaviors.
Right.
Maybe it's the right thing to do, but I would certainly want at least, us to look at the charter and our other documents in order to make that determination.
Yeah. I guess I would say that from my personal perspective, I have zero enthusiasm for going down that rat hole.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew, before we walk too far away, I think, and again, no chair hat on here. I mean, my thinking was that using the A to Z dash dash mechanism, that doesn't, compared to, for example, .homenet or .home, we would still have that problem of having a HomeNet aware application potentially if we had that sort of special reservation. But I think possibly there's scope with the A to Z dash dash of at least being able to have a name which has no possibility of a collision in the normal namespaces that people are currently registering things in.
Okay, so I don't want to fully build out the rat hole and build a basement rec room, but the IDNA reserved everything of the pattern A to Z minus minus.
Oh, okay, I wasn't aware of that.
So they're reserved, and the idea was if we needed to do a nasty hack like this again, then we could do it again. So HomeNet is in the position, in fact, to specify that. The problem is that there are rules out there that currently prevent it, but most of them, of course, are on the registration side. I don't know very many applications that do validation of label strings at lookup time. So you might be able to get away with it. Of course, there is the additional problem that if we thought that HomeNet was not user friendly for the portion of the population that doesn't use Latin characters, MQ minus minus something is even worse. Yeah. And I'm not sure that that's gonna,
no disagreement here.
We could have HN minus minus, I suppose, for HomeNet, but I'm not sure that helps us. Particularly since Arabic speakers, for instance, don't have the notion of initialization, which is not a thing in Arabic languages.
Lee Howard, well, at least if you make it impossible to remember and use, then nobody will try, right? That's internationalized. Actually, I know we tried to do it from the Jabber room, which fantastic conversation in the Jabber room. If you're not there, it's good stuff going on there too. But you're missing out, right?
I'm being excluded.
I know, sorry. There are logs, you can read it later. I feel like we need some name nerds to get in the room. I know we tried to do a design team, and maybe somebody needs to buy a round of beers and see if we can hash out all the possibilities. I'm not qualified to weigh in. It's just I feel like we need to move this one forward somehow, and I feel like this is one where we could easily get stuck for 3 years trying to figure out what the name is.
Yeah. Let's not do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? Okay. So my initial feel is that it's too early to be talking about adoption of this draft, that it's going to need at least a couple of iterations and contributions and significant contributions, if not additional authors.
Well, yeah.
So TED before we can get to that point.
Yeah.
I know we had some volunteers that time didn't permit them to contribute at this point, or rather TED's time didn't give them time to contribute. So there was a design team.
the design team hadn't done anything for a couple of IETFs, I think, or at least one no, it wasn't that, it was a while.
We have not formally created a design team for this. There was a request at the last meeting for essentially volunteers to write a draft that would become this, but it wasn't formally done as a design team.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
we had a few volunteers for that, but ultimately you volunteered to take the lead, and then things went a little quiet, and then you had a big rush, and nobody else had the time to actually weigh in by that point.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, the fact is there were a number of other people who were interested in writing parts of this document, including Andrew, and I would still like it if those people would help.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it would be good to get at least another. Well,
yeah.
I know we already have some proposed changes to do it for a -01 quite shortly on the individual draft, but I think it's clear that we're going to need some fairly substantive additional contributions before we can look at something that we could take forward as a working group document and on which we can gather working group consensus.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also, I mean, just I don't know how deep to go into this, but there's a pretty obvious list of follow-on documents for this that, you know, I think if people see something in there and they're like, ooh, I'd like to write that document, they might want to mention it.
Yeah, and I'd thank Lee for his earlier comment. Yes, if anybody ever says we should write a document about this, come forward and do it, because it's the only, well, if you're new to the IETF, it's the fantastic way of getting into it.
Yep.
Okay, if there are no further comments, and then unusually we've finished somewhat early, so I can go stretch your legs and for the next break and for the next working group session. And we thank you all. If we could please have the other blue sheets returned back to the front desk, and we'll see you folks in Berlin. Thank you.
Well, hello, Terry. Didn't see you there.
If you haven't signed the blue sheets, please do come forward and sign them. No, this is our charter is specifically on the intern facing side of CP, and also CP that are inside the network. So no certified managed CP. So it's all expectation of zero configuration, low maintenance, low management. Slide 11. Oh yeah.